The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 35. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona, this is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Welcome, everyone, to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria, and today I am absolutely pleased to be joined by Mitch Russo. And I want to introduce you to Mitch. He is one of my good friends and an amazing entrepreneur. Started a software company in his garage, sold it for 8 figures, then went on to work. A lot of people, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but this is amazing. He worked with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes to build a $25 million business together. Mitch is an author, wrote the book, The Invisible Organization, How Ingenious CEOs Are Creating Thriving Virtual Companies. And he's here with us today. He's got a new book called PowerTribes, How Certification Can Explode Your Business. Mitch, we're absolutely thrilled to have you. Welcome.
Frank, thanks a lot. Yeah. The book is amazing. It's been a lot of fun to write, and I love getting feedback from my readers. And let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is a power tribe? Like, let's just define that for starters.
Okay, good. Thanks. That's a great question. So let's take a company that you're probably very fond of and know well, and that would be Infusionsoft. Now, I know Infusionsoft changed their name and all that, but Keep, is it, or something? Whatever.
Yeah.
Or Dope. Is it dope.com? I can't. So anyway, Infusionsoft has this nice little product, and let's go back to like 1999 maybe, or 2002. It was around there. Infusionsoft started. They were struggling to get to 5 million in revenue. I had been introduced to the founder early on. We had a few conversations, never went anywhere because I wanted to help him. But so all of a sudden I hear that Infusionsoft got a $50 million investment from Goldman Sachs some years later. So I called the CEO and I'm talking to him. I said, what the heck is going on? How'd you do that? That's awesome. He goes, I got to tell you, certification is the reason why. And I said, really? And of course I knew that I had already built certification for my own software company, but I wanted to hear it from him. He said, well, honestly, it's like people paying you to sell your product for you and doing all of the support. I said, yeah, that's exactly right. And then I started to tell him that there's, I generally say that there's 4 recurring revenue streams from every certification program. And he didn't know about 2 of the 4, which I thought was great. So we talked a bit. I shared a little bit of information with him. And honestly, that's like what got me thinking that, there should be a way to teach people how to do this.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. And if you do it wrong, you will screw your company badly. And I did do it wrong the first time. So when I finally fixed it and I avoided 60 lawsuits, turns out I understood what was wrong and I understood where the problems were. So I rebuilt the entire program and I put like 4 people doing it. So it turned out to be incredible. And then we relaunched it. And in a matter of 18 months, we had sold 350 certification slots. And that put me on the map. So
Wow.
Imagine being a tiny little software company at the time, hardly 5 million in revenue, and having offices in 350 locations all over the country. So that's just one of the benefits of certification. The other benefit is that they pay you, or in this case, they paid me every single year for the privilege of selling my products. So here I am. I have a software company. I'm trying to reduce my support costs. Desperate to do so. It's getting out of hand. 18 months later, have all these certified consultants, and my support demand has dropped by 20%. So there's another huge benefit.
Right.
So on and on and on and on. Certification it's like the golden goose. It just never stops giving as long as you take care of it. And that's where the PowerTribes distinction comes in. So if you ask anybody from Infusionsoft who is a certified consultant, if they like being a certified consultant, they'll grumble a bit and then say, yeah, I guess. Because, if you're not treated well, if certification is not a family, the group needs to be knitted together to support each other. And that's what most companies forget. And I turned out to have done that almost by accident, just because it's my personality. But when you implement the steps in the book, PowerTribes, if you do it, what ends up happening is you create a second family, and that family loves you guys more than your own employees.
So is certification just a thing for software companies? I mean, you started one, you're talking about Infusionsoft, but I think you've got clients that are non-software companies that are doing this, right?
I do. I have education-based companies doing it. I have training companies and coaching companies doing it.
Okay.
I took a coach on, and he was what I would call your average six-figure coach, doing about $110,000, $120,000 a year. And turns out, in a matter of 3 months working with her and really making her and her staff understand the process, we built a team of coaches around her, and she was terrified to do it. But I pushed her, and we got it done. And now she was making $50,000 a month and complaining that she feels guilty because she's not even doing any work. So
I know a lot of people who would complain about that, but I suppose that's a great benefit.
Yeah, I figured you'd probably be upset too.
Yeah. Those people who know me know scale is something I get really annoyed at.
I know. Yeah.
So what? It's intriguing to me that you talk about certification and the sort of like doing it wrong, doing it right. What are some of the, I guess, indications that you've got certification not working right?
Great. Okay, so I'm going to give you an analogy. Remember a minute ago I said it was like a family once you built your certification network, right? Well, what would happen if in a family, mom went over to one of the kids in the family, let's say there's 6 kids for the sake of conversation, and said, "I love you best of all." And then, went over to one of the other kids and said, "Jane is a real pain in the ass sometimes, don't you think?" And then you went over to one of the other kids and said, if your sister doesn't get her act together, I'm going to throw her out of the house. Now imagine this goes on, and you have 6 kids now, all getting whispers from mom, all weird, different stuff, right? That's what typical certification looks like at companies today. And to say that they're leaving money on the table is a super understatement. It's ridiculous.
So it's basically people are treating their certified partners, or whatever you want to call them, as almost vendors, and they're playing favorites and pitting one against the other, and giving sort of prized work over to one and not the others. Is that kind of what you're describing?
I had a certified consultant say to me one day, your program would be awesome in Spanish. I said, yeah, we have a big country here to topple before we worry about Spanish. He goes, "How about if I translate all of your stuff for you for free?" I said, "Really? You do that?" He goes, "Oh yeah." So I said, "Sure," being, the dumbest kid on the block that I am. And so next thing I know, he's actually doing the work, but he's telling everybody, "Oh, Mitch gave me work to do, and Mitch has me translating the software. I'm in Mitch's inner circle now," And so I couldn't believe what I had created, because I had done this now with several of my certified consultants. So I was creating the chaos that, honestly, I see all the time whenever I talk to other certified consultants or coaches. So
interesting.
It's so important to keep the group knitted together and all on the same page. No secrets, no special assignments. I mean, if you want your certified consultants to do something for you, put out a notice and ask them to step forward and offer to pay them. That's how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and that's true. I do know a lot of entrepreneurs who kind of create a bit of an inner circle or a elite coaching staff or whatever that's, people pay to be in, and then kind of use them as free interns for stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So I know, I talk also a lot about, when it's time to start licensing your stuff out and certifying, and especially when you're a coach or consultant, if you've got intellectual property, but there's probably also a time not to do that. So what are you seeing? What's kind of the thresholds or the markers that you're looking for in a business that says, okay, you're ready to start looking at this as an income stream?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you something that I learned from both Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes. What I learned was that if you take a room full of people, and this is Chet Holmes' stadium pitch, if you've read his book. So if you take a stadium filled with people, and let's say, Frank, I said to you, I'm going to put 2,000 people in a stadium, and you can have the stage, but they don't have to stay. So unless you figure out a way to captivate them and hold their attention, they're all going to leave, right? So what Chet describes in that process is that when you pitch a group of people, 2% of the group are actual buyers ready to go right now. If you go down the pyramid to about the 30% mark or 20% down, those people are kind of likely to do it, but maybe not this minute. And as you go further and further down the pyramid, you get to the point where at the bottom of the pyramid, they have absolutely no interest, don't know what you're talking about, and really are looking for the restroom. So that's the model that I use to evaluate whether a company, one characteristic, is ready for certification. So the way I say it is that if you have a process, a program, or you create some form of a transformation in a client or a company, then that's your intellectual property. If you could teach it to somebody else and have them get the same transformation, that's when you are a candidate to create certification. But if you have somewhere between 500 and 1,000 customers, that's when we can apply the scarcity model, get the top 2% of that pyramid, and have them buy certification as your first pilot class. That's why I put it that way.
Got it. So if fundamentally it comes down to not just your audience, these are literally customers who have bought from you and have experienced the transformation themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but to be clear, I mean, I had one guy on my podcast who was if he ended up with 300 clients in his entire life, it would be the greatest career ever, because he's a very specialized type of copywriter.
Yeah.
So 1,000 clients for everybody isn't the same thing. It's knowing that if in your audience, there's a group of people who would love to do what you do if they knew how, and have a new profession as a result, they'd be chomping at the bit to find out what they had to do it.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, I mean, so it makes sense. Basically, certification is where you take your existing success and continue to grow it. This is not the place to find your initial success if you've never done it before or don't have great results from it.
Yeah, it's like, don't do this at home if you're under 18. You know what I mean? This is, if you're not an established business and you don't have several $1 million a year in revenue, number one, you won't be able to afford to launch the program. And number two, you don't have enough people yet to launch two.
Got it. Okay. That's great. That's great insight. Because I do think a lot of people talk about licensing way early. And I've seen people do licensing way early in the process, and it's just they're not ready for it, and all sorts of problems happen, I think, when you're not ready for it.
Exactly.
So I want to pivot really quickly to how you specifically help people get through this process. So do you mind sharing with us, when you work with clients, what that kind of looks like? What's the process, and what do they end up with? What's the outcome for them?
Okay, so the first thing I do when I am approached by a prospect is I interview them to see if they meet the 3 criteria I mentioned earlier. If they do, and if they're able to afford my services, then I sign them up and I get them going. And I'm, by the way, I'm not shy about it. My services cost $100,000, and effectively you make double or triple that back when you launch your program. So what that means is we spend 90 days together building certification, putting all of the pieces in place, getting everybody trained, making sure your learning management system is strong and in place. Then we launch. And when we launch 7 to 10 days later, you get whatever you paid me plus double or triple back. And that's just the first class. You continue to launch these classes every quarter, and now you're generating an enormous amount of money, and very consistently over the coming years.
Yeah. So as you're going through that process, you're helping, are you helping sort of clean up some of the intellectual property as well? Like, it could be that people are coming to you with IP that maybe isn't quite ready for licensing. Do you see that often?
Well, I thankfully I don't see it often, but when I do see it, I assist people and assist my clients in getting it cleaned up, because if it's not, then it's gonna crash and burn. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to get your stuff trademarked, go do that. To license it is a completely different thing, and I think you implied that earlier. So, bottom line is, people got to be ready to go. They got to be able to step up, not just with the money, but with the desire to get it done and the bandwidth. If it's not their bandwidth, it needs to be staff bandwidth that I could work with to get all the pieces done.
Okay. And what kinds of tasks are the staff doing? So, an entrepreneur comes in, business owner comes in and gets us working. First of all, I guess two parts of the question. Number one, what kind of staff do they usually have in place, and what kind of skill sets do those people need in order to be able to execute this?
The nice thing about it is that the people who are helping me on the inside of the company getting it executed have probably never done anything like this before. They don't need to be, I don't need an MBA. I don't need somebody with even a college degree. As long as they're smart, as long as they're productive and they're capable at managing the tools that we're working with, then there's no problem at all. We get stuff done all the time. Most of when we start a new program at a new company, I highly advise that the CEO and the staff identify a new person to be program manager, because it's a real position once you have certification in place.
Yeah.
And in many cases, a program manager just needs to be a person with an incredibly warm and helpful personality and responsible. And if they have that and have basic reading and writing skills and can work a web browser, I mean, they'd be great typically at that job. And that even might be at some point a high paying job too.
So you're providing pretty much all the training for the staff to be able to do the things they need.
Well, again, the process is fairly, when I say complex, I don't mean that the pieces are hard. I mean, fitting all of the pieces together, like the intricateness of an ancient monument. I mean, the way the stones are cut and they're precisely matched. If you put the tools together the right way and you put the resources in the right places, it runs like a machine and it stays running.
Right. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but who should be considering this? Like, what kinds of companies? We talked about size a little bit, but what industries should be considering certification, in your opinion?
Well, you touched a little bit on this before as well. I mean, if people have a coaching organization or they have a training organization, and if what they do is proprietary, because again, I mean, you could go get coach certification. In fact, you could buy coach certification anywhere from $49 to $18,000. I think John Maxwell's program is $18,000. And, at that point, that's not your content. So you can't start, a certified coach program around someone else's material.
Sure.
So, I'm finding that coaches and trainers come to me and want to talk about it. I have several new clients. One of my clients, the one closest to finishing now, is actually a real estate company who has created real estate training. And they've sold that training for many years. But interestingly enough, he was instantly receptive to certification when I said the words, when some of your best clients would like to do what you do, you're a candidate for certification. He says, okay, I'm ready to go. Why? Because his people ask him all the time if they can teach what he's teaching. So we sat down. This is my actual favorite part of building certification program. We went through reconstructing his business model, knowing what I know, and using certification as one of the many components we use when we, jumpstart a company, or if I'm in a consulting gig, I go through my process, which is flow charting and mind mapping everything in the business until we see the opportunities are visually. So I do the same thing, and that's my favorite part of the assignment, because usually I'm blowing people away because, and I'm not a smart guy in the sense that I invent stuff so much. It's that once you have it all on paper and it's all mapped out, it's fairly easy to see what's missing.
Yeah.
So that's my approach. Once we get it all mapped out, then I build a timeline with, dependencies on it, so that we know that the first thing to do is make sure that your training is ready, and you're going to need 2 levels of training. You need your product training, which you already have typically, and you need your coach training, which teaches people how to teach your material.
Yeah.
So now, of course, you can't launch until that's done. So as you can see, there's a whole series of dependencies.
There's some things that need to get done. But I want to call out something that I think is interesting, because you're very focused on the certification audience essentially being the same as the client audience. So I'm assuming you wouldn't recommend someone try to certify and go out and build a completely different client base that would be the coaches if it's not the same as the actual client base.
That's mostly true. What I'm saying is that our first class, our pilot class, should come from our customer base.
Got it. Okay.
After that, you're fine.
You can do whatever. Okay. That's great. That's fascinating. One last question for you. Now we're running out of time, but I want to kind of dig into this in-depth of knowledge that you have on building companies, because you've built several very successfully. What insight would you share with an up-and-coming entrepreneur that you wish someone had told you early on that would have saved you a lot of pain and anguish?
Wow. So the first thing that comes to mind is that when I started my first real company, and I don't mean the one where I was delivering donuts or something. I mean, my first real company that grew to 10 million plus. The thing I wish I knew back then was how to manage people. And because I knew I didn't know how to manage people, I ended up having entrepreneur's disease. And entrepreneur's disease is defined as I could do everything better than anyone I could possibly hire. So why hire anybody? I'll just do it all myself.
Right.
So I did not understand for some years how valuable it would be to basically know how to hire people, how to bring them on board, and how to manage them. Yeah. And when I learned that, it changed everything.
Wow, that's an amazing insight. And to piggyback on that, I find, like, if entrepreneur disease is you can do it better than everyone, then a corollary to that disease must be all of the people I hire can't be smarter than me, and I have to train them all myself to do it my way, which I find to be really fascinating, because if you look at a lot of really successful corporations, you know, that the CEO will actually go look for people that he or she would actually say are smarter than him or her, and to build up an organization and leverage that. So the team management, building a team, managing a team, leveraging those skill sets, that is an amazing skill, and not everyone has it.
Well, you know, I remember once, the first time this happened, it was at my software company when I was about to cut a check to a sales vice president of sales director, more than I make. And he got this in one check, and I was thrilled. I was thrilled to give it to him. And I told him, you know what, here's this check. And it was for like 450,000. And I said, and I'm not paying you enough. So keep selling. I want to pay you more.
That's the right attitude. And it's true. Not everyone has that attitude. That's a great story. Mitch, thanks so much for being with us. Really appreciate it. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But if people are listening to this, they're fascinated by certification, they're looking at the work you're doing in building PowerTribes, where can they connect with you?
Probably the best place is to go to mypowertribe.com, and of course to PowerTribesBook.com, where you can pick up a copy of the book and the course that goes with it, which won't be available much longer. And you know, the other thing, if it's okay to mention, Frank, at the end of September, I'm going to be running a implementation mastermind for those people who don't want to pay $100,000, but a fraction of that, to come and work with me 1 on 10 people in the room. We're going to intimately work together until everybody is 80% done, meaning they have everything done for their certification program. All they got to do is go home and record the videos or write the scripts that we ask them to, and they'll be able to launch and spend a whole lot less money than if you pay me one-on-one.
Wow, that's amazing. Where should people go to find out more information about that?
They should go to mitchrusso.com and just contact me. If you heard this on Frank's show, and would like to talk to me about the mastermind.
Okay, great. And we've got the links for the book and also to connect with you here below the video on the show notes page. Also, if you're listening to this audio out and about, come on back to the show notes page where we've got those links in case you didn't catch it. Thank you. That's amazing. I think there's a number of people probably who, when they heard your regular rate is $100,000, probably went, so that did for us an opportunity for people to work with you if they're not quite there yet. So that's amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you once again. And thank you everyone for being with us on this episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I've been your host, Frank Bria, and we're so thrilled you spent time with us today. Know that you're really busy. You could be spending your time doing a lot of other things. So if you're spending it with us, appreciate the investment and the trust that you've given us. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next time. All right, take care. Bye-bye.